Hi, everyone. I wanted to talk to you today about overcoming with outcomes, using Canvas outcomes to painlessly administer and score SLO questions in a proctored online environment. My name is Shay Carter. I teach biology and chemistry here at Northwest. Here's my email address. If you have any questions, you can email me. Um, I wanted to talk about using Canvas outcomes and the Learning Mastery Gradebook to set up your online course or portions of your in-person course to administer and score SLO questions very easily. Um, in science, I'm going to talk about how our SLO questions are set up. Now, know that SLOs are different for each discipline. Okay, so I'm going to use the definitions of SLO questions and use how we do them in science for my presentation. But if your SLO questions or your SLO scoring is rubric based or is set up in a different manner, there still may be portions of this presentation that apply to you, um, but it may not be exactly how you do your SLOs. I know that we do our SLOs in a very specific way, and other disciplines do them a little bit differently. So maybe you can assimilate portions of the presentation that apply to you, and then maybe we can troubleshoot ways for you to use those portions with your SLOs if you're using Canvas rubrics, or if you're using other Canvas things in order for you to be able to do this easily. So SLO questions. So in science, and I think in math as well, SLO questions are a set of standardized questions that are used to assess student learning in a course. Specifically, how well the student has mastered specific course level learning outcomes, okay, or student learning outcomes, and at the course level. So these questions are usually, in science at least, given in sets, and each of these sets is marked as successful or unsuccessful for each student. They're usually given within an exam, within a proctored exam, and in science we give them blindly to help us know exactly how a student performs on SLO questions. We don't use coaching or anything like that. For our SLO questions, they're usually given proctored and blindly, and they're associated with points for the course somehow. Delivering and scoring proctored SLOs in an online environment is challenging. So why is it challenging? Why are SLO questions hard to administer and score in an online environment? Well, there's a few factors here. So they're scored differently than a normal exam. So there isn't direct support in Canvas for tally scoring. Our SLOs in science are scored per question set. So for example, in biology, we have 5 sets of 10 questions. If a student successfully answers 6 questions correctly, then they are marked successful for that set. This isn't a normal percentage score. And there, in the past, we haven't been able to figure out how to get Canvas to score SLOs meaningfully with this tally scoring method. So it's difficult. Now, also viewing exam results in Canvas, even using SpeedGrader, is difficult, time-consuming, and tedious. So when you're proctoring an exam in person, if you're using a Scantron or you're just using a student score sheet, you can quickly maybe draw lines through each set of questions, mark how many the student got correct, and then quickly go through like a deck of cards and score how many students achieved that successful SLO. But with SpeedGrader, this is hard. Even with SpeedGrader, we love SpeedGrader, right? SpeedGrader is phenomenal, but even with SpeedGrader, viewing results in the same fashion you would view them in an in-person course, it's difficult. It's time-consuming. It's not fun, especially when you have a lot of tests to look through. So in the past, we've administered mini exams. So we will make a whole bunch of little quizzes with each set of questions. So if we have a set of 10 questions, we'll just make one Canvas quiz with that set of questions. This is a nightmare for using Lockdown Browser. If you're proctoring in person, it's not as hard, but if you're trying to use Lockdown Browser, um, it's hard because the student has to back out of Lockdown Browser or enter in new exam passwords, things like this. It's not Lockdown Browser friendly. So there's got to be a better solution. And Canvas came out with Canvas outcomes. And this is a phenomenal way for us to easily score SLO outcomes. Okay, so there's good news. If we use Canvas outcomes plus the Learning Mastery Gradebook, so these two tools make it very powerful, and it's very easy for us to simply administer SLOs and score them pretty easily. Okay, so using Canvas outcomes with the Learning Mastery Gradebook can automate and simplify scoring SLOs and decrease your time spent on them. So how does Canvas Outcomes and Learning Mastery Gradebook help? I've told you that it does help. How does it help? Here are the ways that it helps. Student SLO questions are tallied per question group. Okay, so the learning outcomes, Canvas outcomes will actually, you can set a mastery threshold. And once you align that set of questions with a learning outcome, with a Canvas learning outcome and set a mastery threshold, then anytime the student takes those questions, depending on your configuration, it will tally those questions per question group and assess whether or not the student has successfully mastered those questions, that outcome. It's easy to view the SLO results, and they can even be exported. It's very easy to actually click down and really quickly view the student SLOs at a glance. And then SLOs, it's much easier to be delivered in a proctored environment because these can be built into any regular quiz or exam or assignment, just as any test bank questions could be. And there's no need to go into each student's exam. So there's no need to actually go through SpeedGrader and count questions and things like that. It's all automated. The exams or quizzes or assignments that you build your SLO questions into can also still be scored normally. So if you build an SLO exam as your final exam, or you import a few SLO questions into each of your exams, those exams can still be scored on a percentage basis just normally, as well as when you view them in the Learning Mastery Gradebook, you can see the student mastery for those learning outcomes. So it's a very powerful tool, and it's Lockdown Browser friendly. So in the same way that you would use a regular test under Lockdown Browser or a regular assignment under Lockdown Browser, you can use these. So this is how we would view our learning mastery data, okay, or our SLO data. So once the SLOs are administered, once the questions are administered, and the student takes them, okay, it's so easy to be able to go down and look and count how many SLOs were successful versus unsuccessful. And all you have to do is just count them and then enter that information directly into Zytrax. Makes it very simple. The green squares this is a picture of the Learning Mastery Gradebook within Canvas, and the green squares are successful and the red and orange squares are unsuccessful. Okay, the results are very easy to score. You can quickly just go down and count the green squares for successful, or if you know how many students you have, you can count the unsuccessful squares and subtract. The process is straightforward. It is not simple, okay, but it's very straightforward, and you only have to set it up one time. Okay. Angel and I have collaborated and created a document for you that will be in the Ranger Academy for you to be able to download. It's kind of a cheat sheet. Once you've watched this video presentation, you can download it so that you can remember and go back through exactly how to set it up. It's straightforward. Once you set it up for your course, you only have to set it up one time and it can be copied over from semester to semester. When this presentation was given live, Mark Montgomery actually asked a question about, can we set up generic SLOs, not name them, but if you have the same number of questions per SLO and the same number of question sets, then you can actually only set up your outcomes one time and copy them into all of your courses and then only align your questions differently. And that's a huge time saving step. It was really a smart point to bring up. So let me explain this to you exactly how it works. So the first step is to set up outcomes in Canvas. Okay, so you're going to set up one outcome for each SLO group under the outcomes tab. So I'm going to actually switch over to a course where I can show you, if I can find it. Hold on just one second. So here's the Learning Mastery Gradebook for the course. And then if you'll scroll down and click on the Outcomes tab, setting up outcomes is the first step to using Canvas Outcomes and the Learning Mastery Gradebook. So you'll click on Outcomes. Okay. And then when you go to set up your outcomes, you will just click the plus outcomes. Okay. If you set them up in this fashion, this is a biology course. Biology, I believe that all of our biology courses are the same. We have 5 sets of 10 questions. If you have a discipline, if your discipline is very similar to this, you can also share them throughout your department, and it makes it even easier to set up. Okay. So what you'll do is you'll click plus. Okay, and you'll set up, you'll name the outcome, SLO 6. I'm going to call it SLO 6 because we don't have an SLO 6. You can put a friendly name. This is helpful. I do this in chemistry because it helps me to remember which ones apply to which exams, but you don't have to do this. If you want to set up a generic set of outcomes so that you can copy throughout your courses, you can do that as well. But if I set them up in chemistry and I say, well, SLO6 applies to gas laws, I know that SLO6 applies to gas laws, then in the Learning Mastery Gradebook, I can hover over SLO6 and it will tell me SLO6 is gas laws. But the problem with that is that it wouldn't copy from course to course. So in general chemistry too, SLO6 would not be gas laws. So if you want to keep it generic, that may be the way to go for your discipline. You can describe the outcome, okay? Now, what you need to do here is you need to just set where your mastery threshold is, okay? So what I go in and do is I go in and I delete. All you have to have here is your total number of questions. Okay. You don't have to have a bunch of different criterion ratings. Okay. You really just have to have however many your total number of questions are. Okay. And it has to add up to equal your total number of questions. So for biology, we have 10 points, okay? And that's our total points. So as long as your total points are set up properly, then everything will work correctly. You don't have to go in. When I was first doing this, I didn't know how to do it, and I was still learning and experimenting. The process of understanding this has taken about 18 months for me. It's taken a lot of YouTube and experimenting and figuring things out in order to assimilate this down. into probably a less than 20-minute presentation. But you don't actually have to have a whole bunch of criterion ratings. Even though in my chemistry course, I went in and I added a whole bunch of different ones. You don't have to do that. You only have to have one criterion rating so that your total number of points adds up to the total number of questions that you have in your SLO set. Okay. And then you set your mastery threshold. For biology, we use 60%, 6 questions out of 10 questions for each question set. And so our mastery threshold would be 6. If a student achieves 6 questions, then they're marked successful. Now, our calculation method, we want to use our most recent score. Probably your students will only be seeing these, hopefully your students will only be seeing these questions one time, okay? And they'll only be taking these questions one time. So you don't want to do any funny business with calculating. You want it to be the last time that they took it. And then just don't forget to click save. I'm not going to save this because we don't have an SLO6, okay? So here's how it will look for you, okay? So once you set up outcomes, oops, go back to my PowerPoint. That's the first step. So you set up one outcome for each SLO group, one outcome for each set of questions that you have for SLOs under the Outcomes tab. Then what you'll do is you'll create question banks and align them with those outcomes, okay? You create question banks. There's a few different ways that you can create question banks within Canvas, and we have a couple other professional development sessions on how to create question banks. Some people manually type in each question, and you can do that. And probably with SLOs, unless they come from a test bank situation, typing them in manually would probably be the best way to go. So you can also import them from a Word document or from a TestGen file, a QTI zip file, if you would prefer to do that. However you choose to import them, you need to create a question bank of SLO groups, okay? So let me show you what this looks like. I'm not going to show you how to do it. I'm just going to show you what it looks like within Canvas. I'm going to go back to my course. And you can find your question banks under, oops, not Smarter Proctoring. You can find your question banks under quizzes here. Okay, so if you click quizzes and then you click on the 3 dots, I believe they're called ellipses. I think Angel told me that's what they were called. Here are your course question banks, okay? So however you need to get your question banks into Canvas, do that, okay? Whether it's importing them as a QTI zip file, manually typing them in, you can actually just click here and click add a question bank, tell the name and type in some questions if you would like to do that. That's one way of doing it, or you can import them however you prefer. You can import them as a Word document. But however you do it, you need to import them individually as sets, okay? So each question set needs to be imported as an individual test bank. So you can look here. Here we have SLO 1. Those are our 10 questions from our first learning outcome. So each question set needs to be imported as an individual question bank. And then the last step, okay, the last step. So those are the first 2 steps. It's a 3-step process, okay? The last step for you to do is to, the second step. I didn't finish the second step. Let me go back. Once you have created a question bank, okay, you'll need to click on it and you'll need to align it with your outcome that you created, okay? So this is still part of the second step. So first step, let's go through it. The first step is to create your outcomes, one outcome for each question set. The second step is to create or import your test banks. You need one question bank for each set of questions. And then part of that second step, once you've imported them, you also need to align them. So you'll click on the question set, and then you'll click here and click Align Outcome. And you'll choose which outcome gets aligned, okay? And then you'll click Import. Okay, so I use, as far as naming goes, if my first 10 questions apply to what I call SLO1 or my student learning outcome 1, then I name my question set that, and I also name my learning outcome set that. Okay, so this is where you can actually double dip and save yourself some time when it comes to if all of your courses use the same number of question sets, like Mark Montgomery was talking about. If all of your question sets use the same number of questions, okay, and you have the same number of question sets for all of your courses, you can actually set up your outcomes and then copy them over to all of your courses. And then all that would be different would be importing your question banks and aligning those question banks with the outcomes. The outcomes would actually be the same, because it may not matter from Gen Chem 1 or Gen Chem 2, SLO6 and SLO6 in Gen Chem 1 and Gen Chem 2. We can still call them both SLO6, and they both are still scored the same way. The difference between SLO6 and Gen Chem 1 and Gen Chem 2 is the actual questions within the question bank. Okay, so once you do Align Outcome, then you're ready to build your exam or your quiz as you normally would. So let me show you what that means. So you can go to quiz, and so let's say you're going to put some of your questions on your midterm exam. Okay, so let's say we're going to put in SLO1 and SLO2 on our midterm exam. You can absolutely do that. So you just I'm going to pick 10 questions. I'm going to pick all of my SLO questions from SLO1. That's very important. We're going to talk about a special case scenario where if you need to import only a portion of the questions from one SLO, maybe for the midterm, and a portion of the questions for the final, it gets a little complicated. But for now, if you can keep them all in one set, it does make it quite a bit easier, okay? So here, what I do is we add a group of questions from SLO1 and link the question bank SLO1. And then anytime the student takes the exam or the quiz or whatever they're taking, it will score those questions in the Learning Mastery Gradebook. Okay, so you build your exam just like you'd normally build your exam, except instead of just using normal question banks, you use the question banks that you created from your SLOs. Okay, and then the last step, let me share my PowerPoint again with you, is you view the results in the Learning Mastery Gradebook. No, now before you can view your results in the Learning Mastery Gradebook, you have to enable the Learning Mastery Gradebook. So let me show you how to do that. In your course, if you click Settings, there are a whole bunch of tabs at the top here, okay? To enable the Learning Mastery Gradebook, you'll need to click Feature Options, and then you'll need to toggle this switch that says Learning Mastery Gradebook, okay? What this enables you to do, and it auto-saves, you don't have to click Save, you just have to toggle the switch. What it enables you to do is when you click on Grades, you can go back and forth between your regular gradebook, okay, and your Learning Mastery Gradebook. So once you've enabled your Learning Mastery Gradebook, then you can go back and forth between your regular gradebook and your Learning Mastery Gradebook. I've gotten frustrated in the past because I can't find my Learning Mastery Gradebook. This is something that you do have to do each semester. So each semester you have to enable the Learning Mastery Gradebook so that you can see it and see your outcomes within the Learning Mastery Gradebook. If you can't find it, it's probably just because you haven't enabled it. So if we go and we look here, we can actually see, and you can drag these if you're OCD like me, you want them in order. Okay, you can drag them so that they're in order. You can hover over them and see what the mastery, how your SLOs are configured. Okay, so how those outcomes are configured. If you've created a friendly name for them, so if this is scientific reasoning or something like that, then you'll be able to see that when you hover over it. Okay, and then when you go to tally your SLOs, like for inputting your information into Zytrax, all you have to do is go through and count the successful. Now, caution that it doesn't scroll all the way down. A lot of times there is a second page that you have to click through. Okay. Otherwise, makes it so easy for us uh, to administer and view the results of our SLO question sets and student mastery. Okay, so let's talk about some questions and special cases. Do all SLO questions need to be contained within one exam or quiz? The answer is no. If you are giving a midterm and a final exam, and also follow the rules of your department as well. If your department has specifications that all SLO questions have to be given at the end of the semester, then you do have to follow that. Technically, with this, though, as far as technically goes, you don't have to. If you want to use Canvas outcomes and you want to use Learning Mastery Gradebook, you are able to give your SLOs in sets in many different assignments. So if you give 4 tests throughout the semester, 4 exams throughout the semester, and you want to put SLO 1 and 2 on exam 1 and SLO 7 and 8 on exam 2, however you want to do that, you're able to put those SLO sets in as many exams, quizzes, assignments as you would like. If you have it configured so that it only uses the last time that they saw it, which for our discipline, we only administer SLO questions one time and we administer them blindly. We don't let them see them ahead of time or coach them or anything like that. Then it's not going to be a problem. If yours are that the configuration is that the latest time that they saw them, whatever your rules are, you may have to adjust the configurations. If your department or discipline allows them to be taken several times and you take the highest score, then you may need to set your configurations within your outcomes to accept the highest score. However you do that, you can play around with it and figure it out. For us, we use the most recent because we only give it one time. It doesn't make a difference. Okay, what if I need to split a group of questions across 2 exams or assignments? Angel and I had a horrible time trying to figure this out. We actually went to a new textbook, and I think some of our sequencing for Principles of Biology course got kind of different, and SLO 1, 2, and half of SLO 3 applied to the midterm exam, and then half of SLO 3, SLO 4, and SLO 5 applied to the final exam. So we needed to break up SLO 3 into 5 questions on the midterm and 5 questions on the final exam. We had to reconfigure our learning outcome settings, and we had to really test it out a lot. So I would change the settings, and then she'd go in and take the exam, and I'd say, okay, miss 4 this time. And she would go in and go, okay, I'm only going to miss 4 this time. And we'd have to see just to make sure that it performed exactly like it was supposed to perform. And let me explain to you what we figured out, where if we had to split a group of questions across 2 exams or assignments, what we figured out. Now, we only tried this with 2 exams or assignments, and I will say that this is what worked for us, and it took us a long time to figure this out. You may have a different scenario on your hands with your situation. So I'd be willing to help you and troubleshoot and try to figure things out with you. If you have a different number of questions that you need to split up, ideally it would be easier just to not split them up and maybe say, we're just going to do all of SLO3 on the final exam. But to get it exactly right, we wanted it to be right. So let me show you what we ended up having to do. So our settings within our outcomes, find outcomes for our SLO3, because we knew that we were going to have to split our SLO3 into 5 questions on the midterm and 5 questions on the final. So what we ended up doing is we had to set it for a total of 5 points with a mastery at 3, okay, which is still 60% mastery. Okay, so it's the same percentage as our big group of 10. But the method that we had to use was the decaying average method, okay? And the decaying average, what it does is it's an average of all the results. And I believe it's been a long time, but I believe what happens is it averages them together, and then if there's another average, it will decay. It will weight it less than the average before. We only administer our SLOs one time, so the numbers got a little fuzzy. Okay, but we practiced and practiced and practiced, and this is how we found it to work 100% of the time. Now, what ended up happening was that, let me show you our results. It doesn't look the same as all of the other results, okay? So our SLO3, we end up with decimal places, okay? And we end up out of 3 points instead of 6 points, which is our normal mastery threshold. Your denominator here is going to be whatever your mastery threshold is. So our SLO3 ends up with a 3, okay? We also have decimal places, which is really strange. But when we tested it out, we found it to work for us with our specific scenario 100% of the time. If a student answers a variable number of questions within. Okay, so the greens are actually greens and the oranges are actually oranges. Okay, and we found that it works. However, it may be different for you, and so I caution you that if you're going to split up your SLO groups, you need to be very careful doing that. And you need to test it out many times before you administer your test to your students. Or otherwise, you may be going in and counting questions, which nobody has time for that. Okay. How can I easily view an individual student performance on specific SLO questions? So one way that you can do this, there's a couple of different ways. You can view, let me show you actually. Within SpeedGrader, you can obviously go into that specific student's test and look. You can also look up a student under people. Let me show you. So if you click here and you click people, you can get a little bit more information. So I'm not sure about who these people are. But if you go to user details here, okay, and then you click on outcomes report, okay, you can actually see this student and how he did, okay, on his outcomes, okay. Now SLO3 is different. It says 2 attempts. It only says 2 attempts because we did 5 questions on the midterm and 5 questions on the final exam. But you can see his score, and then I believe if you click on it, click show all artifacts, you can actually see where the student where the data came from, okay, and whether it was mastered or not mastered, okay. So there's a little bit more information for you there. Also, like I said, you can go into grades. Let's see. Let me actually just go into the final exam and go to speed grader for a specific student. Okay. And you can look and see how many questions and which questions that student missed. Okay. Okay, so I want to review with you. That is the whole process. So there is going to be a cheat sheet that's going to be uploaded to Ranger Academy that will allow you a step-by-step document that has screenshots and things like that for you to be able to go through each checklist. Now, like I said, you only have to set this up one time. Once you set it up, it copies over from semester to semester, even the alignment portions. The only thing you have to do each semester is enable your Learning Mastery Gradebook, which is just a simple toggle switch. And you can even do it after the fact when you're going to tally your SLOs if you've forgotten at the beginning of the semester and you're going, where's my Learning Mastery Gradebook? You can actually just go into settings, enable the Learning Mastery Gradebook, and your data is all there, okay? Your data isn't dependent upon whether your Learning Mastery Gradebook is enabled or not. Okay, so let's review. Canvas outcomes, along with the Learning Mastery Gradebook, can simplify securely administering and scoring SLO questions. There's a little bit of setup involved, but it transfers over from semester to semester. And then SLO results can be tallied from the screen or they can be exported. When you export it, it exports it, I believe, as a CSV file, which can be viewed in Excel or numbers or any spreadsheet viewing software. It's not quite as easy to read as it is within the Learning Mastery Gradebook, so I prefer it within the Learning Mastery Gradebook. And you can actually print from the Learning Mastery Gradebook without exporting, where you can see each student's. So if you're a person, each student's results. So if you're a person, I'm kind of the person that I like to kind of print everything and keep it in a file and make sure that I have all of my information, staple it all together. And so if you're that kind of person, then you can absolutely print from the Learning Mastery Gradebook screen. And so that you can see each student's results. And then once you enter it into Zytrax, you can print your Zytrax reports, staple them all together, and put them in your file for keeping for later in case there's any questions. Thank you so much for listening. The cheat sheet's going to be in the Ranger Academy for you to use. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, scarter@northwestms.edu. Thank you.